Out of all the months in the year, October is my favourite. The sights, the weather, and of course, the celebration. The holiday king of my heart, Halloween. I mean really, what other holiday makes it socially acceptable to dress up in a costume, eat coma-inducing amounts of candy, and party on to the break of dawn? Certainly not Arbor Day. Now personally, I go all out for Halloween. As far as I'm concerned, it's All Hallows Month, not just All Hallows Eve. So naturally, I've decided to make a video commemorating it. And since October kicks off the season of death, this particular video is going to be about just that. A little morbid? Maybe, but only if you look at it from one angle. Yes, death is the end, but it's part of life. What's that old saying? Death and taxes, everybody does them? Well, almost everybody. Anyway, yes, death is the subject of this video, but not the actual act of it. What I want to talk about is the many variations of death that have been anthropomorphized by our monkey brains for our own enjoyment. So sit back, grab a pumpkin-flavoured snack, and relax as I take you on a tour through a cavalcade of death personifications throughout pop culture. For thousands of years, we've given a face to death. Ereshkigal, Anubis, Thanatos, Azrael, Santa Muerta, the Grim Reaper. Across the world and across history, cultures have tried their best to personify death itself. And we still haven't stopped. There are countless movies, TV shows, video games, and pieces of art and literature that seek to capture the image of death in a way that our inherently empathic minds can understand. Usually, the act of personifying death paints them in a bad light. Death is scary, there's no doubt about that. Not just for the individual, but for anyone that they might love and care for. So naturally, we humans made it out to be the bad guy. Perfectly understandable viewpoint when you think about how much death takes away from us. As a part of the natural order, death has no emotions, no goals or ideals. As an anthropomorphized being, however, it needs to have them, and it makes sense that our first thought would be to make it a malevolent force with no mercy or sympathy for the people it takes. But like I said before, death is natural, it's a part of life. It doesn't have to be a big bad skull-faced creature waiting at the end of everything. And that's something that a lot of people have come to realize throughout history. More recently, we've seen a lot more positive interpretations of death sprinkled in with the negative ones. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with portraying death as a bad guy. I just like a little more variety in my personified forces of nature. A good healthy balance of skeleton peeps who like to read. Now you're probably thinking, DM, where are you going with this? Well, here's the gist of it. By the end of this video, I want to answer one question. Which personification of death would be the best to grab a cup of coffee with? Or a drink? Or dinner? Or brunch? Whatever hypothetical platonic outing you want to use. It doesn't matter which you pick, they will all end the same, with the transition of your soul from the land of the living to that of the dead. Essentially, Rich Reaper would be the best company at the end of it all. I've handpicked some of my favourites in fiction, and with each one I'm going to put them through what I like to call the heart test. What is the heart test? Well, I'm gonna break down that acronym for you right now. H stands for humour. Are they a doom and gloom kind of death, or do they try to look at the brighter side of things? I don't know about you, but I'd rather laugh my way to the afterlife rather than cry. E stands for entertainment. Would you have a good time hanging out with them, or would it be a long monotonous trip to Snoresville? A stands for attitude. What's their disposition like? Easygoing and willing to listen, or quick to anger and willing to reap you early if you get on their nerves? R stands for responsibility. How seriously do they take their craft? Are they going to actually do their job, or, mess around with you? And T stands for tenderness. Whether or not they're likely to use compassion and empathy to usher you to the other side. We've got the system, we've got the scenario, now all that's left is to put our assortment of deaths through them. Let's get started. Let's start with Grimm, from The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, a quintessential Cartoon Network show for anyone growing up in the 2000s, starring the eponymous Jamaican psychopomp Grimm and his two human best friends, dumb as bricks Billy and scare you shitless Mandy. Immediately, it should be obvious that Grimm passes humour with flying colours. Greg Eagles' portrayal of him and Maxwell Adams' writing of him makes for a hilarious character that'll bust your gut with sassy remarks and perhaps the best scream ever put on TV. Entertainment easily gets a pass too. From what we see of Grimm, he's down to have a good time. Attitude is where things get a little off-kilter. Grimm has a bit of a temper, there's no doubt about that. While at times he can tolerate Billy and Mandy, it's only really because of the deal that forces him to be their friend. When it comes to anyone else, he doesn't exactly have patience. That is unless you're Dracula, but I can't fault him for that. Responsibility-wise, Grimm isn't exactly a great Reaper. He's had his title contested and lost on more than one occasion, and he didn't even really win it fair and square in the first place. I don't think I'd trust him to actually reap my soul. More likely it'll get trapped for eternity in a telephone rather than end up where it needs to go. And as for tenderness, forget about it. Grimm can be empathetic, but he personally considers himself to be a being of pure evil. He won't just put zero effort into making your transition to death comfortable, he'll actively make it torture. Next up is Thanatos from the Supergiant Games game Hades, an interpretation of the mythological Greek personification of death. As the resident cold ham sulker of the House of Hades, Thanatos immediately fails humor and entertainment. The guy is the wet blanket to end all wet blankets. In all likelihood, he'll probably end up using any time you spend with him to brood while pretending not to notice your presence. But despite his Linkin Park on repeat disposition, his attitude isn't awful. He can still be kind, in his own way. I mean, yes, he acts all huff and puff when he's talking to Zagreus, but he always leaves him with a little kindness. And when it comes to responsibility, he's very efficient. Clearly, he does his job, and does it well, overseeing the transition of souls in the mortal realm so much that more often than not, he's not even in the House of Hades. Finally, Thanatos just manages to eke it out in tenderness. At first, he seems a bit standoffish, but he has his moments. Let's just hope you don't have to be as stunningly handsome as Zagreus for him to treat you right.
You have no concept of which impulses to act upon and which to keep in check.
Our next death is our first that is both death by name and nature. Death from Discworld, the literary masterpiece fantasy series by the unparalleled Terry Pratchett. While not as bone-splitting hilarious as Grimm, this death has a sense of humour. He can find laughter in the little things, and is sure to not put a damper on your last meal before the afterlife. He passes entertainment too. Given the utterly captivating conversations Death has throughout his appearances, speaking at length with him would be a worthy bookend to any life.
Humans need fantasy to be human. You need to believe in things that aren't true. How else can they become?
Attitude is also a pass. This death will be calm and collected as long as you don't give him a very, very good reason not to be. Responsibility is another home run. Death understands his place in the universe. He recognizes his importance, but he isn't prideful. He simply understands the necessity of death in life. More than most deaths, he is fascinated by humanity. All of our little quirks and rituals are things that ensnare his interest rather than his ire. I have no doubt in my mind that he would extend a skeletal hand of empathy towards anyone passing from this life to the next, just as long as they were willing to accept it. To contrast that spectacular showing of heart, we have Mistress Death of Marvel Comics fame, a cosmic abstract that balances an entire universe and on-again, off-again paramour of the mad titan Thanos. Now, humour is an interesting field for Mistress Death. She can either be stone-cold stoic with nothing but serious thoughts to express, or a giddy, joke-cracking skeleton/goth who gets her jollies watching the suffering of others. Either way, her material isn't exactly great, and if suffering gets her to crack a smile, it's more than likely she'll get herself one by watching yours. Despite that, she passes entertainment, but only if she brings along her boyfriend. If you've watched my video on their relationship, you probably already know just how much I enjoy Thanos and Death's back and forth, going from lovers to enemies to lovers again. You can't tell me it wouldn't be entertaining to just sit back and watch them bicker for a bit before shuffling off the mortal coil. As for attitude, that's already kind of been covered with humour. She'll either be completely silent or sadistically sassy. Responsibility-wise, she's not that great, but it's not exactly her fault. She lives in a comic book universe. Death is not a big deal, so much so that Mistress Death herself almost died because somebody installed a revolving door in the afterlife. And as for tenderness, well, it's just all over the place. Like I said, Mistress Death tends to flip-flop between personalities, but there is one thing that is true. She wanted Thanos to wipe out half the universe. She specifically requested it. So, if there's one thing we know for sure, she isn't what you would call compassionate. Coming up now is Death from Adventure Time. His humour doesn't seem to be anything special. He isn't a jokester, but he doesn't seem to be a buzzkill either. When it comes to entertainment, I don't think he really has that much to offer in that department. Sure, he likes making mixtapes and taking care of his rock garden, but compared to the other deaths I'm assessing, he doesn't really make a splash. Attitude, however, is a pass. This death is a little more easygoing, a go-with-the-flow kind of psychopath, but that's why he fails responsibility. He's perfectly okay with giving up souls that have already passed on, whether in exchange for something of value or just plain favoritism.
What? You know Peppermint Butler?
Yeah.
Yo, you guys can have whatever you want.
And as for tenderness, well, I think the fact that he was willing to kill a small child to steal her Walkman speaks for itself. Now last but not least, we have Death of the Endless from Sandman fame, the goth girl that'll get you to the beyond with a smile. So one last time, let's run through heart. Humor? She's got bucket loads. Death may be macabre in nature, but death doesn't let that get her down, and she won't let it get you. She's notorious for being able to cheer up the grumpiest of grumps, including her perpetual sad boy brother, Dream. Entertainment? That's a pass too. She'd be a hoot to have a conversation with, there's no doubt about that, especially given how she can charm most anyone in spite of her occupation. When it comes to attitude, it's out of the park too. She very rarely blows her top and manages to keep a relaxed and nonchalant mood. After all, she's been doing this since the first living thing ever passed on. She's used to it, and she knows that keeping it mellow is in the souls she's taking's best interests. Speaking of her tenure, Death's responsibility is bar none the most impressive pass. As a member of the Endless, she came into existence long before anyone else in the universe, only being beaten by her older brother Destiny. For as long as life has existed, she has been there, and she has never faltered. She will always do her job, she will always carry out her purpose. Always, until the very last living thing breathes its last breath. And that brings us to tenderness. And let me tell you, there probably isn't anyone more likely to keep you calm and comfortable as you transition from life. With Death, you feel nothing. You're just suddenly dead, and there she is. And when you see her, it's like seeing an old friend, not a stranger decked out in Hot Topic merch. You're reassured, not just by her presence, but by her words. And just like that, it's all over. No fuss, no muss, just a warm tenderness that'll make your heart beat one last time. Well, that's everyone, and you know what that means? It's final score time! In 5th place, we have Adventure Time's Death. In 4th, we have Mistress Death. In 3rd, we have Grimm. In 2nd, we have Thanatos, and joint 1st is Discworld Death and Death of the Endless, both of whom passed with flying colours. So there you have it, 6 different deaths ranked by their hearts, a dose of the macabre with a healthy helping of delight. And if that doesn't embody the spirit of Halloween, I don't know what else can. So go on, dress up, eat some candy, watch a scary movie, enjoy the season, because it's only a matter of time before he shows up and steals away the spotlight.
You better watch out, you better watch out.
Happy Halloween everybody, and I hope you have a spectacular All Hallows month. Hey, if you like that video, I got a lot more, most of them just me rambling about the things that I like, but if you're into that, go ahead. And if you're really into that, feel free to like and subscribe.